Welcome to LifeWorks Today. This podcast is provided so that together we can create a world in which all people love their lives. Our current human systems aren't working. The way of superior versus inferior, or management versus employee, or adult versus child. We need a powerful, positive, and sustainable transformation. This podcast is for you who seek to be happy, fulfilled, and peaceful so that your abundant life works today.
Welcome back to our podcast, Lifeworks Today. This is our second episode called Puppet or Powerful. Before we get into this episode, I want to just go back and review the last episode a little bit so that you have a little bit of context. I introduced something that I thought was the most important starting place, and that is that we're all operating within a set of control models that we don't generally question. We don't generally question their effectiveness, their counterproductivity, the importance of considering dismantling them, and then if we dismantle them, what do we put in place? So in this episode, what I want to do is I want to go through what is a healthy culture. If control models are not the healthy culture, what is the healthy culture and why does it matter? So that's the most important thing, the why does it matter? What's the relevance of it? In the first episode, we covered what are the concepts that you need to consider in order for your life to work today, and what are the norms right under your noses that really could be the central cause for why people become discouraged and disengaged, and a lot of people are sort of struggling inside and struggling with each other. So one of the things I covered was the inferiority complex and how important it is to recognize that if we don't set up certain conditions and conversations, people start to go into uninterrupted struggles within themselves, things like stress and anxiety and depression, and between people, like arguing and righteousness and win-lose dynamics, those sorts of things. And so we also covered to try to demystify what is emotional intelligence, and that it's simply being self-aware and managing ourselves, being aware of the dynamics we have with others and that we witness in others, and be able to manage the relationship dynamics. So I encourage you to go back to episode 1 and really listen to that in depth so that this can even become more unified and holistic for you as we move into this second episode. A couple of other concepts that we covered is that there's really no good old day. You know, that's really important because it's so easy for us to go back to our default and to think that things were so great in the good old days, and why can't we go back to them? And I just want to let you know that you're settling for something if you go backwards to the quote-unquote good old days, because those good old days always involved certain groups of people that were being oppressed, coerced, subjugated in the win-lose position, and it really wasn't good for anybody in the good old days. So we want to move forward into that place where we don't do power over or power under, but where we help each other to build that power within and to have confidence with that power. And we also talked a little bit about the change process. And some of this information that you hear today in today's episode may cause you to feel like, wow, this is new information. I don't even know if I buy in yet. I don't even know if I have the will or the determination or the understanding to take any steps forward into it. And just know that's okay. Remember, from this program, all these programs that I do, the most important thing I want you to remember are that you deserve to have a life you love, and you deserve to treat yourself with compassion and curiosity as you learn and grow and you try on new things. So in this episode, I kind of switched up the title because I think I called it something like, are you a puppet or are you creative and powerful? But I wanted it to be really a focus on, we're either under the influence of believing we're a puppet, or we're trying to make others into a puppet, or we're actually using power rightly. So I wanted those to be in contrast. Imagine a person being, with a puppeteer where they don't feel like they have that strength of their own will, their own ideas of how things should be going in their lives. And many, many people feel that way, no matter what age. I've worked with people that are in their 40s and 50s, and they're so used to doing what they think others expect of them, whether it's an internal authority figure or an external authority figure, that when they slow down and start to be developed whether it's them helping themselves be developed or them being developed by other people around them. It's almost an alien, scary, and unfamiliar place for them. So the way that this ties into the last episode is that, remember when I was talking about the control models, those all come with negative beliefs about people, limiting beliefs about people. In the autocratic mind, your mind is, I don't trust them. I have to police them. I have to manage them. In the incentives and rewards, the idea of a person is you'd be basically lazy and selfish if I didn't dangle a carrot in front of you. So in the judgment model, that's where somebody's positioning themselves over another person and doing bestowal to them, bestowing praise, bestowing shaming them. And in the so you're holding again, you can't. You're not as good as me. I have to be the judge of you. And in the fourth one, it's pampering and spoiling, actually believing I kind of have to carry you and do for you and overcompensate for you. So in all of those, you're holding people very negatively. Whereas in this model that I'm going to be talking about, your belief about people is you are and want to be great. That all people are and want to be great, even though they don't always look like they want to be great. So when they're not being great, I'm going to talk about what's going on for them and how do you create the kind of culture and the kind of conditions and conversations where people can start seeing themselves as great and they can start living into that greatness, and you can feel successful in supporting them in that greatness. Okay, so I am sitting across from one of my very good friends and clients, Gabriela Ramirez Arelanello. I'm not sure if I ever say your last name right.
That's okay.
I'll let you say it back. But she's kind of chomping at the bit to join in, and I'd rather introduce her sooner than later. I met Gabriela when I was working with her at the Hispanic Chamber. She also is a business owner of a restaurant. She's a person that really coaches and consults other people in their business career paths and helps organizations to grow and flourish and connect. And I'll let you say anything else you want to say.
Sure. I'm just so excited to be here, Judy. I mean, ever since we started working on everything that we've been working on at the Chamber and just in general with different aspects of your business, it's just been exciting to see you present. And oh my gosh, the information that you provide is so valuable, right? So not just what you show us in the sessions that we have at the Chamber, but having gone through some of the modules and going on tour with you when we went to a couple of conferences, I feel like all of that continues to feed my soul about the work, about how to truly live a life that you love. And I'm really starting to take it to heart because I mean, it just makes sense. Why do we live a crappy life?
Yes, that's a good way to put it, crappy life.
Who willingly would do that?
Yes.
But not knowing that we have the tools and the ability to do it a different way is a life-changing and awakening experience.
Yes.
And I don't know if you want to start now or we want to wait until we get into the things, but I remember one of those first questions or one of those first things that you brought to mind that just really made me genuinely inquisitive about, oh my gosh, I have a say-so, is what do you want?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You asked me that.
Yeah.
And I was like, no one's ever asked me.
Right, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but you're not a teenager, so you're a person that's been around a while,
Right.
and it's hard for you to get in touch with what do I want. I was working with a teenager recently, and I said, "What is your inner voice saying? You know, that wise voice?" And she said, "I can't even hear it." And I said that, and then that just really hit me because I realized, yeah, as soon as you believe that it's unsafe to have a voice, you will subjugate your own voice because it feels unsafe.
Right.
And one of the reasons I think I was so drawn to this particular psychology model is that it helped me understand that we're always interpreting things that are happening. So you can kind of understand why a teenager or a 2-year-old would be afraid of their power, because the messages that are coming at them are, don't be like that, don't be different, don't think for yourself, don't dare question us. You know, that is often what's going on. So you get conditioned to think it's not safe, I won't be loved, I won't be supported, I won't be able to survive, I'll be all alone if I actually claim my own inner voice. And I think I forgot that until I was working with that teenager, even though I see it day in and day out with a lot of different people.
Right. And I mean, I think it's just a constant reminder that no matter if you're in a position of power, not power, middle management, in school, to really claim your power.
Yes.
But you have to know first that you have it, and that you also have to take responsibility, because it's not just about, oh, I've got the power now, I get to be the judge, I get to be the one that makes other people feel bad. You know, what are we really doing? And so that's a lot of what I really have enjoyed with the mentoring and with just understanding how other people, maybe why they're acting out, instead of acting, power under, power over, all of that comes into play. So again, I'm sorry if I'm getting ahead of myself.
No, you're fine.
But
this is perfect.
It's just amazing to me to be able to, at 50 years old, to finally say, oh my gosh, what do I want?
Yes.
And so excited about you being able to do this work with, younger generations, because we don't want them to wait till they're our age.
No.
To realize that they could live a life they love.
Right. And I think when they don't realize that they have interpreted it as though they're fragile and that love is fragile and that their power is something to be scared of, they don't realize how much they're already missing out on. And I don't think most people know that they're causing them to miss out on it, or that we're causing each other, which kind of leads me into one of the key things that I wanted to talk about with you, which I think you and I both really like, is that personal responsibility chart that we teach. And I was thinking about it because even when we say the words, we want to develop power within, we don't even know what that exactly means, because the word power often conjures this notion of power over people. Like I've got to be somehow real strong looking. And I was thinking about how power is not always real strong looking. It could be that you're talking with somebody and they ask you to do something and you say, hang on a second, I need just a second to think through this. That doesn't look real powerful and decisive necessarily, but when a person's really powerful, they're going to go through a process that sometimes says, my first feeling is this, and then I sit with, well, could I live with that consequence, good or bad? And then maybe another answer comes in that actually feels more aligned with a person. And then they're really powerful because they're lining up who they are and who they want to be at their best. So in the last episode, I told a story about an 8th grade boy who wanted to create peace in his school. But I asked him first, what do you want? And so when he was asked the question, do you want peace? Do you want peace with this teacher? He had to sit and decide that. And so we want to teach people to get clear about our power is that wise voice that doesn't come from stress and fear and panic and pressure, and I better make everybody happy and I better not rock the boat. So that kind of power is not widely modeled by people.
Right. And I think that that's a great example about power, because the power that we claim ourselves is the one that we often don't do, that leads to all this other discord.
It is.
So even just the example of someone asking you to do something and truly understanding, I don't have to do it if I don't want to. I have a choice. And if I feel powerful, I'm able to say, hey, guess what? I can't do it today, or I can't ever do it. But a lot of times we let people take our power away by automatically agreeing, even though later on it's a conflict with our schedule or it's not something we agree with. So I love that example because it seems so simple, but it's a perfect example about reclaiming your own power.
Well, and even if I'm going to go into my little coaching hat, but even the words I can't do it, or I can't do it today, or I can't do it ever, it's even more powerful to go, wow, I don't want to. I don't want to today. I may not want to tomorrow.
Right.
And oftentimes it is even more of a choice than we think. I remember when I talk this over with people in the business world, they'll say to me, well, there are some things you have to do. I said, no, you don't. Really. You could say, I either go to work today. Do I want the consequence of the paycheck, or do I want the consequence to stay in bed all day? Or do I want the consequence of this versus this? And yet we treat it as if those aren't really choices, but they really are choices.
Right. I mean, even the other example that we talked about last week, where it was a snow day and our boss was out of town, and so Narishka said, hey, we're all adults, but if you want to stay home, make sure you tell the boss yourself. So she was kind of saying, hey, I don't want to be in charge of you, but you also need to own your own voice. So if you're willing to go to him directly, go for it.
And that's also a good example of a third option, because if she was the one in authority in that day, she could set it up in a way that she felt comfortable with. So her comfort level was, I'm okay with you having this choice as long as you're making sure that you're communicating certain things.
Right.
Where someone else might just say, I'm going to give you that freedom and trust you to use it well, and that would have worked.
Or
but in her
tell
mind,
them, you have to come to work.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Come to work.
I really felt that was her empowering them to make the decision.
Yes.
Or at least feeling like that they could. But then they also had to weigh their options on, do I want to have to call the boss or not? Do I want to risk going out in the snow, depending on where I live? So
that's why I love this example, because when she did that with them, she was creating conditions and conversations where they were thinking through what they wanted to do and what their part in it was. What we typically do is we take all that choice away from people. I remember one time asking my good friend Mike Bitter, what is the difference from codependency? What is the opposite of codependency? And he said, it's your work. And I realized he's right, because when you start to go, what am I feeling? What do I want? You're not making that contingent upon someone else's behavior. I don't know if you remember or not, one of the people at the session with you last week on your team said, well, what if the other person doesn't do X, Y, and Z? Or what if this person, and I see that all the time, that we're so busy being in other people's yards around what we want, when we don't even like taking care of our own yard to ask, what do I want and what do I feel? I think we still have a lot of childhood fear inside of us that says, that's unsafe territory.
Right. And I guess, the more that I've been working with you, the more I realize how important it is to go back to your childhood. Like, I almost hate the excuse of, blame it on your parents, and it's something that happened in your childhood. But for me, not so much because of my childhood, but because of the way it was ingrained that I had to be a certain way. And then you're an adult at 50 years old and you finally realize, oh my gosh, I don't have to do that. It's so eye-opening, but also
it's both
exciting.
Liberating and exciting and terrorizing.
Because I'm like, oh my gosh, I really don't have to do anything.
Right.
If I don't want to, I don't have to do it. Like, what's the worst that could happen? But it also makes me be more appreciative of having certain powers over myself.
Well, that's the thing. I think even when we're a kid, like the reason I opened last episode with that 8th grade story is that it would be so tempting for most people to look at that kid who came into the meeting saying, I've been bullied by a teacher, because he was being bullied by a teacher. And it would have been so easy to say, poor little 8th grader. And what I wanted him to learn was, it's all about your interpretation of what you're going to do with this. And so really, when we go back to our childhood, it's not just to look at maybe where our parents influenced our interpretation. It's where did we agree with them? Where did we think maybe that is how life works, without realizing that that could have been faulty logic?
Right.
And so from that place, we can have curiosity, we can have compassion on our parents, compassion on ourselves, and which kind of leads into something that I don't know if we've even talked about this. I think we have, but I wanted to go over a little bit more about what makes a person responsible. Okay, but before we get into that, Gabriella, I want to just remind our audience that LifeWorks Systems specializes in performance management through healthy culture transformation, and that culture can be within us or around us. So to learn more about LifeWorks Systems and how to get involved with us, including access to the information that's related to today's episode, please visit our website at www.lifeworksystems.com. Subscribe to our podcast, where you can find the main points on each of the podcasts, a list of all the podcasts, and additional information on each episode that we produce. We invite you to also join our mailing list to receive information on and find free videos, seminars, webinars, articles, surveys, my book, and how to contact us by phone or email.
And I would say that you have to check out the blog posts, because they're amazing. There's so much content. So if you're not listening right now, take a moment, go to the website, look for LifeWorks Systems on LinkedIn. Amazing content. Then I don't even know how you find the time to put so much stuff together on a daily basis. And it seems like you're in my head, because whatever you post that day, I'm like, oh my gosh, she's looking at me.
You've made my day, Gabriella. Thank you. I appreciate that, because I do love writing, and I never ever thought of myself as a writer, but it just feels like it kind of comes through.
And especially because the titles that you put, sometimes when you read stuff online, the title does not match the content, but your titles are always relevant, not only to my life, but they actually match the content that you produce.
I'm glad.
So I know I'm not supposed to be here for a commercial, but
it's okay. Keep going. No, I'm just kidding you. Well, I appreciate that. And I love it that you like this particular topic, because I do feel like it's another really central piece. And so I like having the conversation with you. So whether or not you remember this, I want you to understand why I'm so in love with the person of people. I'm in love with the person of who they are, because we are really here to be connected with one another. We're very much social people. We want to feel a healthy sense of belonging to each other, a healthy sense of connection with each other. And when we have that, so many things go right. It really does feel to me a little bit like heaven on earth when that's happening. And so when I studied Adler, Adler's psychology, he had 5 major concepts, and one is that we are these social beings, and that if we don't have those conditions that are just right, and we're generally not doing them right, people will go into that inferiority. But he also said that everything we do is purposeful. That means that what I wore today, how I'm speaking today, who I've invited, all the things of my life, I'm doing with goals in mind, even though maybe 80% of them are somewhat subconscious to me. And that's an interesting thing that reminds us we have power, is that we're always doing things to cause things. And that kind of ties in with the fact that we are so subjective. And what that really means is that you and I could be looking at the same event and we might interpret it completely differently, have different physical and emotional reactions to it. We could make different decisions about what it means to us personally, and we would create our own values and beliefs and behaviors out of that, which I think is fascinating in itself. I remember a time where a friend had surgery on her arm, and her arm was completely exposed. You could see her bones and her veins and everything. And her 2 sons came to visit her. And one was like, that is the most disgusting thing. He looked like he was going to throw up, and he was like, I could never be a doctor. The other one was, that is the coolest thing ever. I can see your veins. I can see your bones. He was making decisions about himself and about what he was seeing. They were very, very different. And so even knowing we can change, like we have this notion that we've been formed by the time we're 7 years old or something, and that's largely true, but it doesn't mean those things can't be undone or shifted. It just means it's a little bit harder to get at them unless you know how to get at them.
Right.
So that's really, really why I'm so infatuated with this model, because the more that we understand what makes us tick and how we got where we got, we don't feel so at the mercy of it. You know what I mean? Because sometimes, like I was reading the other day, I've become a vegan, and I read that we all think we're so controlled by our genetics, and genetics only plays about 5 to 10% of what's going to happen to us. So we have way more control of our outcomes than we know, and I think it's true also in this area of psychology. And then the 5th thing that he said is that once we make decisions about life, we determine the conditions around us. We massage those conditions often to create a world that will fit what we think it's supposed to fit. So maybe I have this interpretation that men are scum, and I don't, but maybe I was taught that and I believed it. And I got scared around men. I could meet the nicest man on the planet, and I would turn him into a scum-like person if I could do everything I possibly could. If he was stronger than me, I might have to change my mind about men. But if I believe that that's what's going to happen, I will be influencing that outcome. And I don't think we realize we're doing that a lot. And so that's what it means to be self-determining, creating our reality. We really are kind of co-creators, and we don't even know we are. And the reason it's hard for us to look at it is, if we look at our co-creativeness, we think it might be bad, we think we have to get punished for it. So part of your ability to own and honor and love and trust and grow in confidence and grow in skill with our power is letting go of believing we're going to get punished for it. And so when we know we make sense, when we know that we need help to do all of these things, we will do them well. But a lot of us just haven't even understood what makes us human. And the thing that I love the most that Adler said is that we're holistic. We're always trying to get back home to our best self. And that even includes someone that's out there killing, maybe, that example of somebody that might kill somebody on the street because they want to fit into a gang and they're going to override their conscience. That person is actually trying to get back to a state of belonging and significance that they wouldn't have otherwise. So that I wanted to cover those things because that is what sort of honors our humanness. Mm-hmm. Had you heard about those before?
You know what, I think I remember you talking about some of these, and what I love about this work is really just the understanding, the level of understanding that you can get. And again, like you mentioned, it is subjective, but somebody could interpret, some stuff and say, you know what, I don't believe in it. Mm-hmm. And through the last couple of years, I've just slowly really been trying to understand how I can hold space in each of those areas that you mentioned. In fact, you know that my daughter and I are like constantly at opposite ends of the spectrum, and so something happened this weekend, and usually she's the one that gets upset, but this time I got upset. And it was so weird because I got upset, I yelled at her, and right after, I hadn't even hung up, and I'm starting to write her an apology Because I'm like, oh my gosh, what state of power or power under am I in that I'm reacting to her crisis like this?
Yes.
So I sent her a message, and I thought I should call her, but no, I'm going to send her a message, and I sent her a message, and I thought she was going to blow me off or whatever. And again, me thinking for her.
Yes.
She responds right away, "That's okay, Mom, I understand." And I was like, oh my gosh, this has never happened in my life before.
Yes.
Where, one, I knew that I was wrong because I'm smarter now. I understand that there's something going on both ends.
And it doesn't sound like you spent any time beating yourself up. You just immediately said, oh, I see my mistake. I'm going to fix this.
And I even thought, oh my gosh, what would Judy say if she were here?
Oh, that's hilarious. Well, I really like that because somewhere in there you got over your fear that even if you looked and saw something that you did that you wish you hadn't done, that it wasn't a disaster, that life wasn't that fragile, that you weren't that fragile, that your relationships weren't that fragile. And the reality of it is sometimes you could do something like that and it blows up in your face and you even get to the point where I'm strong for that even.
Right. Well, I just kept thinking, it's my job, it's my responsibility. I have to
mine.
own this relationship. And if I'm worried about what she'll respond or that she's going to blow me off, then I'm not owning it.
Do you have to own it?
I don't have to own it, but I want to own it.
Okay. So do you know, I caught you saying that, right? You know how it goes with me. So when we say things like that, like I have to do something, the question we want to always goes, wow, I hear myself saying I have to. Or you might hear your daughter saying, I guess I have to go do this, right? You can say, what would be the barrier? So you want to live this way, right? What would be the barrier? I'm afraid I won't remember. I'm afraid I'm never going to do it good enough. I mean, there's probably a barrier in there somewhere.
Right. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of barriers. One, will it be reciprocated? Am I going to feel like I'm going out of my way and the other person isn't?
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up.
But at the end of the day, I can only control my yard.
Yeah.
I can only control, how I feel and how I react. And because I do want to be intentional about living my best life, I've heard you say it enough times where I'm starting to think, okay, I need to follow that. Like, I want to have a purpose in my life, and that is one of them. Then I need to just take responsibility, regardless of what's going to happen on the other end of the telephone.
Whether they reciprocate or not. That's when you know you're free. When you realize my behavior does not have anything to do with what they do with it. Because otherwise, when we're doing that, we don't know we're in discouragement. We're actually being transactional. We're thinking, I got to get something from them. So even that's okay because we don't even know how transactional we are because we're so often more discouraged than we know and feeling like everything's so fragile. So I keep using that word fragile because just talking with that teenager, I realized she had already decided, and this is happening to a lot of people at different various ages, that everything's so fragile and scary. And it just really isn't. Not making mistakes isn't. Taking time to think about what you want. I think the reason I loved all the stuff about Mr. Rogers that's out right now, his documentary, his movie, he models that complete presence and honoring of the child within him and the child within other people and the adult within other people. And we don't do that. It's like we have no faith in each other until we do.
Right.
And part of it is just knowing that we're not, most of us, getting what we need to do that well. So when I talked about the 4 control models in the last episode, the model that we promote is called the responsibility-based model. And the reason that's hard for people to put their head around is because we're so used to the control models and they feel so endorsed and they feel powerful. If I held a gun to your head and got you to do something, it might feel powerful. If I could hold out a carrot and get you to do something, it might feel powerful. But if we could remember that those are actually weakening everyone and we could really put them down, the belief is often that if I do that, the alternative is permissive, and it's not. The alternative takes high character, high intention, high love, high purpose, and it's very demanding in a good way. It feels good like when you do a good workout. It feels good like when you do a great job on something. So it's not permissive, and I want the listeners to really get that. So when you do a responsibility-based community with somebody, whether it's a conversation or a community that you build at your workplace or your home or in your school, it is one in which you hold high belief. It's one in which you transfer responsibility to the people that you're with in a way that they can feel fully supported in picking up that responsibility and owning what's theirs to own. So like even in our conversation, you're picking up on, oh gosh, Judy's going to call me on it if I say I have to or I should or I need to. She's going to pick up on that. because when we're in community with each other, I'm going to continuously be helping you pick up what's yours and put down what's not yours, that sort of thing. And the way that I do that, and the way we do this with each other, because you and I have done this, is we mentor each other. And all that we do in our mentoring is ask a lot of questions. Just like that 8th grade boy. What do you want? Do you want peace? Oh, do you want to see where you're doing war? All those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I actually, talking about the mentoring, I found myself looking for the mentoring worksheet the other day because now at work, I have somebody that works under me. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to make sure that his experience with the boss is nothing like the ones that I have had and I've heard, crazy horror stories about other people having. Yes. And really just asking him instead of feeling like, okay, as your boss and or your mentor, I know everything. Yes. And I'm going to tell you how to save your life and your day. And so really understanding and giving him the ability to see that he has all the answers.
Yes.
Right? Yes. I keep telling him, what do you want?
Mm-hmm. And when you create the understandings of some of these tools that he can be using, you can say, hey, which tool would you want to use? That's what you and I did with each other.
That's my next step, but I got to learn all the tools.
Right. But even as you go, and that's why I love the idea that you can be friends with him, even though he's quote unquote subordinate, right? You could turn around and give him the mentoring template that you've just done with him. Right. And that's probably one of the greatest gifts you could give to the person that you're leading, is let them have a healthy relationship with the authority figure that isn't scary and overpowering and perfect all the time.
Right, yes. In fact, I introduced them to somebody the other day, and I said my colleague, and then they responded, I thought you were his boss. I'm like, what's the title?
Yeah. Well, I remember...
We work closely together.
I remember working with a group where they had been doing this model for a couple years, and one of them was promoted. And she and I had a meeting, and she said, I guess I can't go to lunch with my best friend Hannah anymore. And I said, why not? Because she automatically flipped into, if I'm promoted and I have this title, now we have to go into this inequity thing. And I said, as long as you're being as responsible with her as everyone else and you're not giving her special favoritism, you can maintain all the friendship that you've ever had. And she goes, oh my God, I totally forgot. Mm-hmm. So even when you get a title change, if you don't remember, your mindset is not the same in this responsibility-based model, right? Mm-hmm. This is a great place where we can share a reaction with you from people who have shared feelings about this very thing.
Session with one of the owners. It started off thinking that this is going to be them just talking at me, but the first time that they legit had an actual LifeWorks mentoring session where it was an actual give and take, a legitimate transfer of ideas and feelings and stuff like that.
It's hard to believe that we can be so mutual with each other in a responsibility-based model. And it's hard to believe that another person's going to hold for us a belief that you can handle your relationships. I have faith that you can learn how to and have courage to go handle those relationships, whether they're easy or hard. Mm-hmm. And I can help you to pay attention if you're as productive as you want to be. And I can help you to find out if there's anything in the way of you loving your life and engaging in it. And I can even help you have a plan so that you can keep moving forward in your life. And so that's what I really want people to know. Adler talked about it like this. He said, if we all learned how to own our own tasks, we'd have an amazing world, because we'd be so busy being responsible for our own world that we wouldn't be in everybody else's business to avoid our world, because we feel so shameful in it, so inadequate to it, so low confident in it. And that's the cycle.
Right. And that's another key thing, I think, the part of LifeWorks systems is helping you even understand those feelings, helping you identify them, because you might just see someone that's acting out because they're powerful, but then you realize, well, they're insecure, or they're in fear, or, there's these other words that you maybe don't have, that we know the words, but we don't necessarily realize to label that. And maybe label is the wrong word too, but
no, I know
to
what you mean.
identify that word with the reaction that the person is having.
Yes, I mean, even the fact that we could be saying we're talking about culture, someone else might be talking about a completely different kind of culture than a responsibility-based culture. So even that term, and what does it mean, and how do you hold people, like you have a positive belief about them, what is your job with them? It's not to manage them, it's not to motivate them, it's not to judge them, it's not to enable them. It's to help them become owners of their tasks. So even that language language is so explanatory, but most people haven't even experienced that kind of culture, right? The other thing, I think we all assume that we have the same ideas about what should be happening. Like, I don't know why this is popping in my head, but I'm just going to tell this story, and you probably heard me say it before. I remember of all the Twilight Zone episodes, the one that I remember the most is this guy dies, and he goes up to what looks like the pearly gates, and there's this group of people, and he's like, oh my gosh, what are you guys doing? And they're like, we're here to do anything you want, give you anything you want. And he says, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. And they say, well, what can we do for you? And he says, can you get me a big mound of gold, And they said, yes, come back tomorrow and it'll be there. And he's not sure it's really going to be happening, and he comes back, and sure enough, there's this big mound of gold. And he asks all these different things throughout the entire week, and he gets every one of them. And by the end of the week, he looks to the people and says, I don't know what to ask for. I kind of thought this would be more fun to be in heaven. It's kind of boring, and I'm a little restless. And they said, who says you're in heaven? And the reason that's so powerful is we've been sold this notion that to be a happy human being, we just have to take care of number one. Mm-hmm. And in the Adlerian model, the idea is that we use our power in service to all, which is very different than even the term servant leadership. I don't like it unless people realize that means all of us need to be leaders in serving one another, whatever, if we're janitor or executive in title.
Right. Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And when you talk about owners of your tasks and owners of your power, it really brings it back to that exactly, right? Because we're led to believe, or in our mind we think that it's a certain way, that we're going to be happy. How many times have we thought, oh, as soon as I get X, that next raise or the next job title or the car or pay off this debt, that all of a sudden that's going to transform our life, without realizing that we have it inside of us, we just haven't activated it.
Right. All we have to do is look at a lot of celebrities that have tried every other thing, and they're beautiful and talented and rich, and they commit suicide or a drug overdose. It isn't that guarantee. And often that's a place where we're not taught to be there in that way for each other. And one of the ways I like to tell people what social interest is, which is what you're doing when you're transferring responsibility to someone, you're also transferring their social interest, is to notice what consequences do I cause you. And so I remember one time being at a grocery store, and I saw a little boy ask his mother, why can't we park in this parking spot? It was the handicapped. And she said, do you see that $500 on there? That means that if we get caught, we would probably get a ticket from a policeman, and we'll have to pay $500, which was the saddest thing ever, because what she could have said is, what's really cool about our community? We watch out for each other. We want to make sure that everybody can get in that grocery store, and especially those people that can't walk well. Isn't that great? And so what she was focusing on were the consequences to him, which is very self-focused. And it won't bring him the happiness that she wants for her son. And yet she doesn't know to say that, to actually use that as an opportunity to teach him social interest. Isn't that kind of sad?
That is kind of sad.
Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, we live that way in a lot of other areas of our life.
Yes.
So I am so glad that we have been working with you, and even just the opportunity one-on-one for me to have done a couple of one-offs and attend the conferences. I want to say that I've gone through all the modules, but I haven't. But the fact that I have access to the tools, like you mentioned, and that I even know the concepts is life-changing.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm seeing a little bit with my daughter where we're having a better relationship. But a lot of that is because I stopped trying to be the know-it-all figure and kind of said, like, hey, you have power. This is your life too, and you have to take control of it. Or you would want to take control of it, and not solving everything for her.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the hardest, especially as a parent, is thinking it's our job to protect them, save them, manage them, all those things. And really, our job is to trust them faster, further, more frequently. So
we're not doing a good job.
we just haven't been taught. So even in that, we have to be compassionate. That's why this whole, and I want to wrap up with this whole individual psychology, this whole notion of a responsibility-based way of operating is still not mainstream. That's why I try so hard to spit in that soup of the control models, because until we're ready to put that down, then we're going to be able to go further and further in this responsibility-based structure, which has lots of beauty, richness, complexity, and gifts. And so we'll just continue to unwrap that, but hopefully people have at least a sense of there's an alternative to control. It's not permissive. It's not milquetoast. It's not weak. It's powerful and rich and beautiful, and it brings forth. Right. I want to share these comments from a person on this very idea.
And a quick anecdote for me personally, I can say, so I've had the blessing in my life to take 2 maternity leaves, and one was pre-LifeWorks, and one was post bringing in LifeWorks, and I will tell you the coming back after my second maternity leave was much easier than coming back after the first one without having this responsibility-based model. So just a little personal anecdote of how I really felt it.
And that's a big stake to get over, because when you start giving people permission, you think they're going to take advantage of it because you don't trust them with it. And so I feel like a lot of times that's the first big step for a lot of companies, is trusting.
And allowing them to make a mistake in such a way that you're not that thrown by it, because they're still scared of their power and you understand that. Exactly. So you don't go, oh my God, this stuff doesn't work. You know, I got to go back to the ways everybody else is doing it. That's our biggest challenge, is how to prepare people for that transition, because it is a little scary. It's scary even for the person getting the power. So you have to get to the point where you know your power is so good and that theirs is, that you don't carry any fear into the room over it, even when they're freaking out. So one of the things that I have been trying to do is connect the dots for people. And so I had a futurist friend come to me recently, and he said, you know, what you've built is a teal organizational model. He has a master's in social work. And I said, what is that? And so I went and researched it, and he was right. And what I love about the teal, and I encourage you that are listening to go to my website. Under the articles, there's a category called Teal Organizational Model. There's articles I've written, articles that industry has written. So you can kind of see how this is tying with the trends in culture change right now. But what I discovered was that teal has a lot of these qualities that I talked about with Adlerian principles, that we're holistic, that we shouldn't be splitting ourselves out when we're at work and at home, that we should be with each other in ways where we can be the same person everywhere, where we drop all this hierarchy, power over stuff, and where we create leader and follower skills within people simultaneously, back and forth with each other. So I really encourage people to read the teal organizational model. It can almost seem a little bit like kind of heaven on earth kind of thing, even though it's not a spiritual term. But it's a natural progressive evolution where people do have a different level of faith with each other. And what's really interesting is that it's starting to be the method of choice in the most progressive organizations, because they're aware of how fast everything is changing, how complex everything is, how global everything is, and they need to have confident, trusting, happy, responsible people to fulfill everything. And so there are technologies today, like agile practices, where people know that there's this way they could be in group, but they've never been taught how to be in group. And so this responsibility-based model is aligned with the agile principles, with the teal organizational models, and things that people are reading about, but they're not necessarily sure, where do I go to implement that?
Yeah, no, I definitely would recommend people check out the articles, because some of the things I got out of that, especially your articles, was not just the principles of what a teal organization looks like, but also how to apply them. What do I really do? A lot of times you read that greatest article or the greatest new thing, and it sounds great, but how do you actually do the work?
Yes, it's the implementation. And so we'll talk about that in a future episode. One of the gifts that I bring to the table is, I think, in terms of systems. And so I liked to build and have built systems that are implementable. And that's something that people don't really know. They don't know that being a human being is more complex than they thought, and that it requires more understanding, and that it requires a set of guidelines that can be consistently sustained amongst a team or groups, or even across a country or world. And once they can kind of get their head around that, they can start to recognize it when they see it.
Yeah, we need to get you in all the schools and the hospitals everywhere. I'm serious, because I feel like, I don't know if it's age or whatever, but just reflect on the fact that there are so few processes that have taught us how to be a parent, a human, a mother, a sister even.
Or happy.
Or happy, right? I mean, even bunched up, the higher arching thought process is exactly that. How do I live a life of purpose? How am I happy with what I do? And that would be, I mean, the happiness comes in from knowing how to be a sister and a parent and a colleague and
it rolls
even
everywhere.
just a neighbor.
Yes. I just thought of a t-shirt we could create. Go from crappy to happy. Because she opened up by saying that. Why do we live a crappy life? So for those of you that are listening, we are so grateful that you joined us today, and you are the inspiration for us to share with you. And we hope that something that we've said in this episode will have lifted your heart, given you hope, made you curious, and helped you to believe that things can get better. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Judy.
So people, those of you that are listening, make a commitment to do something with this information. Go on the website, take the survey, download my book, go look at the articles. Go to the articles that say industry articles and check out what Forbes and Inc. and some of the larger players are saying about what's going on with culture and the trends today. So we hope that you'll join us again and that you'll take that action and make your life one where it works.
And don't forget to go to iTunes and leave a 5-star review on all your favorite social media platforms, because the information that Judy has and the Lifeworks system shares is definitely something that we all need. We may not realize it in the moment, but as you start to learn more and hear more, you're going to be able to start to apply it to your daily life and just wonder, where have you been all my life, Judy? So be sure to give her a 5-star on all the platforms, because that will also help her be more visible to more people, access them more. And the articles on her LinkedIn page are amazing. You guys got to go check them out.
I love you. I love you.
Thank you for listening to LifeWorks today. This podcast has been brought to you by LifeWorks System CEO and host Judy Ryan. The intent of this podcast is to provide you with hope and new ideas for greater joy in your life and work. For more information on our organization and earlier podcast episodes, related articles, videos, and more, please visit our website at lifeworksystems.com. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast and mailing list. We invite you to join us in creating a world in which all people love their lives and where your life works today.